Wadi Dawkah, a journey through Oman's Land of Frankincense. A podcast produced by Ne in collaboration with Amouage. Wadi Dawkah, home to no less than 5,000 frankincense trees, was inscribed on the UNESCO World Heritage List in 2000 as one of 4 Land of Frankincense sites. The designation spotlighted the importance of the frankincense trade across the ages in the Sultanate of Oman. This spurred the Omani government and Renaud Salmon, chief creative officer at the perfume house Amouage, to start building a high-quality industry for Omani frankincense essential oil. Dominique Roques, a perfumery natural ingredient sourcer for more than 30 years, who is also tasked with plotting the renaissance of the precious tree in Wadi Dawkah, is our guide to discuss and document this ambitious project as it unfolds in the coming years.
Good morning, Renaud.
Good morning, Dominique.
How do you personally think it was important to launch in this adventure?
The answer to that question is to be found in the story of Amouage. Amouage was created 40 years ago. Originally, the very first fragrance of Amouage was created by Guy Robert and contained 3 key ingredients of Oman. One of them was the rock rose from the mountains, one of them was the ambergris from the shores of Oman, but then the key one was frankincense from the south of Oman, from Salalah. And over the years, frankincense became more or less a key signature of Amouage. Now, as you know, Dominique, we have access to different qualities of frankincense from different countries, and I'm curious actually to know more about it from you, like the different origins and so on. But for Amouage specifically, it was important to reinforce the sourcing of frankincense from Oman. The frankincense from Oman has a very specific profile, and maybe we can talk about it. It's very important because it's part of the culture, it's part of the society in Oman, it's part of the everyday life in Oman. You go to a house in Oman, people would burn frankincense. You go to the souk, you see frankincense everywhere. So for me, it was key actually to reinforce the link between Oman and Amouage and the link between Amouage and frankincense. Now, when we heard about the willingness actually of UNESCO and the authorities to find someone, to take over the patronage of the site, we felt that, it had to be Amouage. So this is when I contacted you, and now, I'm very curious to know, first of all, you've probably done it all, when it comes to resins and so on. So what triggered your interest with that specific project? Can you tell us a little bit maybe about the different qualities of frankincense that you can find around the world and so on, and specifically about the Omani one? What makes it very interesting for you?
I think it's really what's happening and what will happen in the coming years in Wadi Dawkah is truly fascinating. Why? Because not only do we start with an amazing historical ingredient, maybe that could be challenged as being the first ever ingredient for manhood perfumery, and also because what's going to happen is something that, to my knowledge, is very seldom done, which is to offer to a large public what is usually pretty secret or pretty hidden, not well known, which is what is a perfume tree? How is it processed? How do we get the resin? Where does it come from? People don't know this, and what is going to be extraordinary in Wadi Dawkah is that until the end, which is the people will be able to watch a distillation process, which means starting like really wandering in the desert around the trees, people will end up being able to smell what is and what was already a perfume, centuries ago. So, the challenge to bring this experience to a large number of people, for me, is absolutely fantastic. So, to come back to your other point, what makes Omani frankincense so special? I think a few things here. Frankincense is a family of trees. You can find frankincense trees in India. You can find it in Ethiopia, but there are different species from the ones that perfumery gradually over the centuries has selected, which is the Boswellia carteri in Africa, Boswellia sacra in the Arabian Peninsula. This tree is truly absolutely magic. It's magic for what it gives, because honestly, you can smell all type of frankincense, but no frankincense smells like the real Boswellia. And in that selection, of course, there are debates and discussions, because you can find it in Somaliland and Somalia on one side of the Gulf of Aden, and you can find it, of course, in Oman and in Yemen on the other side. So which is the best one? Well, a lot of perfumers seem, if you offer them, which is pretty recent, the ability to compare between the two qualities, a lot of them would choose the Boswellia sacra, which is the one from the Arabian side. So we know basically that in history, these two qualities, Boswellia sacra, Boswellia carteri, have been mixed many times for a long time, and still are, which makes the project in itself so exciting, is that we in Wadi Dawkah and with Amouage, we will make certain to really identify very clearly the supply chain of the Boswellia sacra in the Dhofar region, and to make sure we offer this precise quality to the visitors and to the industry, because of course there will be production of essential oil. So, Renaud, why the choice of Wadi Dawkah specifically?
I would say it's an iconic site. It was the birthplace of the frankincense road, and this is why it's part actually of the bigger actually UNESCO site that they call actually the Land of Frankincense. So I think from an historical point of view, first of all, I love the idea to go back to the very root of the industry in a way. Secondly, the reason why it is the root of the industry is the location. The location of the Wadi is kind of perfect in a way, because it's located on a plateau between, on the one side, the desert, and then on the other side, the sea. The sea would bring the monsoon during the summer month, and the desert would bring like the dry heat, and this makes the perfect condition for frankincense to grow, and particularly for the best quality of frankincense to grow. And I think we've seen it when the trees are too close to the sea, and the bark starts actually contaminating a little bit the resin. When actually the trees are too much in the desert, they probably don't grow that well, and they probably produce less resin as well. So we've seen that the location of the site is really good. And finally, there are already a lot of trees. So one of the first discussions when we started the project was, well, what is the capacity of the site in terms of trees? Do we need to re-densify the site? Do we need to add more trees? Do we need to, let's say, plant seeds or move trees and so on? And I think, this is a fascinating topic. I think we could spend hours talking about how to move frankincense trees and so on. It's probably not the topic of today, but I think all of that explains why the site is probably one of the best sites in the world actually for this project. If you want to understand Wadi Dawkah, you need to understand the broader, actually, perspective of the Land of Frankincense. So, the Land of Frankincense is a UNESCO World Heritage Program that includes 4 different historical sites that were part, actually, of the historical frankincense trade. The first one is called Ubar. It was actually a storage place where frankincense was actually stored on the way on the frankincense road. There were 2 trading places of frankincense called Korori and Al-Balid. They were by the sea, and this is where actually frankincense started actually traveling. And then the last one was more of harvesting site of frankincense, and this is Wadi Dawkah. So Wadi Dawkah is one of the 4 sites that are part of the Land of Frankincense. And obviously it's very important for historical reasons, but also today, particularly for touristic reasons. And this is maybe one of the challenges that this project presents, because we need to balance several types of development. We want to develop a natural ingredient, which means, crafting something that is related actually to ingredients. But we want to develop as well the touristic aspect of the site. And why is that important? Because as part of the criteria set by UNESCO, in order to be defined as a UNESCO site, particularly a World Heritage Site, Wadi Dawkah actually needs to contribute to the knowledge of frankincense through actually the tourism. So with this project, we need to keep in mind that we want to produce an ingredient, but we want also to develop the tourism around it. And this is why, obviously, we need to balance the approaches. We will need to have an educational aspect to the site, and we will need to have a production aspect. And what is best, ultimately, than actually showing the real production as a way to educate people about frankincense? I think this is what we want to achieve with Wadi Dawkah. I remember vividly, one of the first questions I asked you, we were looking at a very big tree. And I asked you, what's the age of the tree? Because that's a question everyone asks when you see a big tree. And the answer you gave was, well, if you really wanted to know the age, you would need to cut the tree, because then you would count, the age of the tree with the trunk. But I guess it's not the only thing we are going to learn, right?
No, I think if we keep on with the trees, this is absolutely fascinating, because the opportunity that we will get in Wadi Dawkah is very rare. There is very little known about frankincense trees, honestly. They've been here forever on one side of the Gulf, as I said, or the other, but little is known. The trees are there. There's this tradition over the centuries of tapping the trees that has been done. The resin is harvested, and that's it. And nobody knows much more than that. In Wadi Dawkah, definitely we want, on top of other things, to learn much more about frankincense trees. As you mentioned, why some of them are in altitude and how do they behave, why some of them are lower, and what's the difference? Is there a difference in yield, in the quantity of resin they will give you? Is there a difference in the quality of the resin? How old are the trees? As you mentioned, very mysterious. As I said several times, we estimate that in Wadi Dawkah, the large trees, which are absolutely magnificent, could be between 50 and 150 years old. But we're not sure, and I like this idea that we are not sure. It leaves a bit of mystery of these sentinels in the desert. But we're going to learn a lot more. And what is already fascinating in the project, and this is actually launched and started, is that we want to turn the Wadi Dawkah into a smart forest. Smart forest meaning that each individual tree is actually tagged and will give us information about everything we do. Do we irrigate them? When? With how much water? Each harvest, which is done, currently ongoing between the month of October and May, with the results for each tree will be noted. This has never been done before. This is absolutely something completely new. So it's a fascinating journey, because at the same time we're doing this, we know that very soon people will be able to witness it. So it's going to be some kind of deep knowledge that at very short term is going to be shared with everyone. And of course, we love this idea. And I think Amouage can be very proud of being the leader of this idea.
And we learn already with the first harvest, right?
learned with the first harvest. We think that this first season we will very soon have 100 kilos of resin, and this is already a beautiful result, starting from scratch, really from nothing. And this gives the opportunity also to build a team, a local team with Omani workers that are really working in very interesting conditions, and that will take pride in really getting involved again of what they know was a tradition of their ancestors, tradition that for many reasons has been partly lost. And this aspect of defending, renewing this tradition is so important. And I know, Renaud, you're it's something very important for you.
Of course, and I like the fact that you mentioned 100 kilograms of resin. Obviously, it does not feel like we are starting too fast. The first season, we really want to learn. We don't really count, I would say, on this quantity of resin and essential oil in a way. For us, it's really to learn the first season. What are we going to do? Probably the first thing we need to understand is the yield, what we can expect from each tree, and also depending on the age and location of the tree. We will get resin. Then from the resin, we will need to understand the yield in oil and how to extract. And then the part I'm obviously, in my position, very passionate about is what are we going to do with it. So I can't wait to share the results with the perfumers that we have selected for this project. See actually how they feel about it, because we will start talking, okay, do we need to fractionate that ingredient? Do we need to keep it as pure as possible? Do we need to mix different batches, different seasons, and so on? All of those discussions, I guess, are going to happen at that time. And then how to use that ingredient in fragrances, which I'm very curious about.
So speaking of using the ingredient, of course, I must witness that another very exciting aspect of the project is, at the same time, there is work on the future touristic center happening. There is work, of course, on the trees that we've mentioned. And there is work, and it's now finalized, about the distillation unit that will be assembled on the site and which will process the resin. We will have a little center of investigation which will provide a lot of different samples. And I think you mentioned your creation team, which will be able to really select what for Amouage will be the ideal ingredient to use in the perfumes of the coming years.
Totally. And there are lots of things that are going to happen. And I think, we will learn along the way. So sometimes the parameters might change as well. So today we think that we have, a clear direction and vision and so on, but then we will keep on learning. And when I think about frankincense, when I think that, this is a beautiful natural ingredient, sometimes, I think there is an emphasis being put on the fact that, this is an expensive natural ingredient. But in a way, it's not that expensive compared to other naturals and so on. So it leads me to also the question of, what is the fair price of frankincense? Where do you put the cursor between, doing, I would say, a super qualitative and exclusive ingredient compared to, this is an ingredient that we would like to have in as many fragrances in the future as possible, because we believe, that it's going to contribute that way to the economy of Oman and to, in a way, to perfumery. What do you think is the role of that ingredient in perfumery, and how is that correlated to the price?
So you're touching a very, very important topic here, Renaud. It's important in general for natural ingredients. I think in the course of today's perfumery, the value, the cost, the price of natural ingredients is very debated and challenged. Why? Because for a long time it was in the interest, let's put it very bluntly, of the industry to keep the prices as low as possible. Over the course of the last maybe 10, 15 years, it's been more clear that this is not the way to follow, because this leads to potential disasters, as we witnessed in the past with other ingredients like patchouli crisis, vanilla crisis. So now, today, I think there is an ongoing movement which is very important, which is basically to understand and clearly respect the reality of the life of communities at the source of these ingredients. Here, what again is going to be fantastic in Oman is that we absolutely want to design gradually a supply chain that will be fully traceable, ethical, and realistic. And we want to learn gradually what is the price that Omani frankincense should have. And I know, we all know that Amouage is completely committed to that and absolutely willing to understand the reality of the cost of these ingredients. So once we know that, we have a solid base on which we can work, because you cannot expect a development in the future of these ingredients if you don't respect these fundamentals. And it's only on these fundamentals that then you can build maybe a large-scale quality, lower price, and a high quality with different pricing, which is also very good because it can serve the tappers and it can serve everybody in the supply chain. So these fundamentals, we're now working very hard on that. There's a lot of parameters that come into that, including the protection of the trees against the camels, that have, for a very important part, contributed to, unfortunately, degrade and limit the resource of frankincense. So all these things will lead to again, I insist on that. The supply chain should be ethical and should be very realistic. And I know these are the values that Amouage really shares in everything they do, and we feel it on the ground in the Wadi Dawkah project, and it makes it absolutely fascinating. Everybody in this project would like it to have an artistic side. Can you, without disclosing too many secrets, tell a little bit more about that?
I mean, obviously, everything Amouage does needs to balance art and craft. So if we craft the best ingredient, but then ultimately it's not inspiring creativity, I think ultimately the objective is not going to be met. So, Amouage always takes pride in, I would say, leading a little bit with a unique creative vision in the perfume industry, and particularly bringing together artists. So the site will, at some point in time, host a beautiful visitor center in order actually to facilitate the tourism, but also to be a meeting place for different type of people. One will be your average tourist in Oman who does not know much about perfumery in general, but who would like to spend half a day to get to know perfumery better. So usually they would go to the manufacturer of Amouage in Muscat, but then if they go to the south of Oman, we want them actually to be welcomed at Wadi Dawkah, and we want them to be able to understand in 1 or 2 hours the different steps it takes actually to craft a magical ingredient. The second profile of people are going to be probably people who are a little bit more into the world of perfumery. So imagine perfumers, imagine maybe perfume lovers, people from the perfume community and so on, or journalists. And for them, we would like to be able to go a little bit deeper into the production process and so on, which means that we need to put together a beautiful visitor center that needs to be informational, but that needs to be also very inspiring. I think, we are currently in the process actually of selecting an architectural vision, something that meets the criteria of UNESCO. So UNESCO is very adamant when it comes to doing something that respects the site in terms of visual impact, but also in terms of ecological impact. So we want to meet the cahier des charges of UNESCO, but we also want to create something that's going to resonate for its artistic value around the world. So that's what we are trying to do right now. So Dominique, when did we start working together on this project? More than 1 year ago?
Yeah, year and a half.
A year and a half ago.
Yes.
So what did we do in 1 year and a half? I remember we had the first trip that was all about like understanding the region of Salalah and Dhofar, and then specifically the uniqueness of Wadi Dawkah. Then we explored a lot about the idea of moving frankincense trees that are potentially endangered by developments and so on. And then probably the last 6 months, you've spent them mostly at Wadi Dawkah, preparing the first harvest, right?
Yes, I think there's a number of challenges that we had to face. In this project, and I love it, it's about humility and ambition. It's both sides. Humility, well, we visited with you and with the team, Wadi Dawkah, and the trees were in such bad shape. Again, I mentioned eaten by the camels. So one big piece of work was to properly manage having fences protecting a very large area. And this has to be done cleverly because this has to be in full agreement with the local communities so it doesn't hurt anyone's ways of living. So we did that, and today there are no camels grazing the trees anymore. This is a fantastic achievement because if you don't have that, you cannot even start to think about how to maintain the trees. Then, you mentioned it, Renaud, it's very important. Is it possible to move mature trees that are somewhere in Oman endangered and to move them and to replant them in Wadi Dawkah? We've tried to do that on a large scale, and I cross my fingers, but it seems to work. And this is very, very remarkable, makes the tree, the Boswellia, even more remarkable. It seems to have properties similar to the olive tree, where we can see in Europe that a lot of old trees are moved and replanted again. If we can do that, and it seems we can do it, then it's fantastic because it's both aspects. Of course, we will enrich Wadi Dawkah with mature trees, but also we will absolutely save these trees from being destroyed. And it's true in Somalia, it's true elsewhere. When industry in whatever form comes to these countries who badly need it, they don't care about the trees. The trees are the last thing that's on their mind. But it is very much on our mind. And I think in the spirit of the project, the protection and the rescue of trees, and we have a fantastic partnership with the Botanical Gardens in Muscat for that, is really part of the challenges that we've already addressed. So protection of the trees, enrichment of the Wadi Dawkahs. Everything that we've done for the past year is about trees, because this is where it all starts. Of course, it doesn't prevent of moving on all the other aspects. And also, to do that, another big achievement was to build a team, which I mentioned briefly. We have a very competent gentleman heading the team here in Wadi Dawkah. And as I mentioned, it's very, very important to embark Omani workers in all of this project. We want to show at Wadi Dawkah that really Omani people care about frankincense, and even if they were a little bit distanced through time from that, we want to reconciliate and bring them again into this whole story. So a lot of challenges ahead. We want more trees, much more trees, because we need resin. And as you mentioned, the first steps are just first trials, but from hundreds of kilos, we want to move very fast to tons, and which will mean dozens and dozens of kilos of essential oil so that it can serve all Amouage purposes and ambitions.
Mm-hmm. And for me, that brings me to my, I would say, more creative challenge, which is to make sure that the artists I work with, particularly the perfumers, they know this quality of frankincense as early as possible so that they can start considering it more and more in the fragrances that we work on together. So for me, the biggest challenge from a creative point of view is probably just the adoption and the awareness actually of that quality, because as soon as I think people will fully understand what we fell in love with, the uniqueness of the profile and so on. I think it's going to open the door for new creations that will be unique, distinct, and very special at first for Amouage. But I think the ultimate vision is not to craft an ingredient that would be forever exclusive to Amouage. I think the ultimate vision is for Amouage to contribute to the economy of Oman and to put Oman on the map actually of perfumery when it comes to natural ingredients, much more than what it is today. And ultimately, I think we would be very proud. I guess you will agree with me, Dominique, that if one day many houses and brands, consider or use that quality of frankincense in their creations, I think that would be probably one of the best example of success of our project.
Of course, completely, and I must say, and I know you're an expert on that, the fact that all this work will contribute to really distinguish very clearly what is Boswellia sacra oil from a Boswellia carteri Somalian oil will give clear choices to the perfumers and avoid confusion and allow them to use very specifically the high content in alpha-pinene that the sacra oil has and that distinguishes it from the others. And I know it's a source of inspiration for your perfumers.
Definitely. And that's why I personally love this ingredient, because again, it's an ingredient, according to me, that does everything. It hits the top notes beautifully. It's very vibrant. It has this citrusy aspect. It has this beautiful camphorous aspect as well that, that is tamed in a way by the citrusy aspects, and then it feels mineralic. It feels woody as well. It's warm and fresh at the same time. So again, my personal evaluation, but it's also what comes out of the meetings that I've had with a few perfumers, is that ingredient has a very unique profile.
Quite a fascinating aspects here and a lot to look forward. It was great to have this conversation with you today, Renaud. Thank you very much, and we keep on going.
Definitely, Dominique. As you know, I love our discussion. Perfumery is about debates, is about human interactions and so on. So I thank you for your involvement in this project, and I can't wait to be again together, probably by a frankincense tree and looking at new leaves growing. I find it magical. So see you soon, Dominique.
For sure. Thank you, Renaud.
Thank you.
Discover more stories and content related to Wadi Dawkah, a journey through Oman's Land of Frankincense, on podcast.bynet.com and on the main podcast platforms.